Hello, everybody. I want to talk about a technique today called the drop-through technique. And this technique is going to help you move through emotions that are not getting you to your goals. And so I use this technique today in regards to moving through some doubt. And I was like, there's probably a lot of other entrepreneurs or high performers out there who could really use this technique. And so I want to tell you how to do it. And so I was feeling this experience of doubt. And now the context of all the whys, they don't matter. They're going to keep you stuck. The thing that you need to know is that you can move through your emotions. Like, you don't have to be stuck in your emotion. You don't have to constantly analyze your emotions. You can literally just move through. And this drop through technique allows you to literally do that. Now, this technique involves you imagining as though you're literally dropping through this feeling. The problem that people have whenever they have these feelings come up, in my case, doubt, is that they want to identify with them. They feel as though they are the doubt. And so you want to find a way to feel as though you are separate from that doubt. You want to disassociate from that doubt or whatever feeling that you're moving through. And so you want to imagine as though you're falling through that feeling. And so as you're falling through that feeling, it's going to feel, for me, it felt like a really dense cloud, like a really heavy cloud, like I'm surrounded by something. But the something is not a part of me, but I'm falling through something. And in my mind's eye, I'm imagining that this is the feeling. Now, most people, they feel this feeling and they just have thoughts and stories and they feed into it and they're literally feeding their own storm when you don't have to do that. With the drop through technique, you imagine as though you're falling through this feeling, and then as you're falling through this feeling shifts. Now, this feeling doesn't shift to something productive right away. What's going to happen is that you're going to fall through this feeling and you're going to feel other negative emotions that are associated to that. You don't need to analyze them. You don't need to get stuck in them. You just feel them. And so in my case, as I was falling through, I was feeling feelings of frustration. And as I'm sitting with that feeling for a moment, it falls through in disgust. And then it falls through sadness. And then it falls through the feeling of inferiority. And then there came a point where I felt nothing. And this is typically where people are going to get to, is that you're going to feel nothing. It's like, but you don't want to stop here. There will come a point as you're sitting with that nothingness, you're going to start having some positive feelings come about. And so in my case, I was feeling pretty calm. I was like, okay, I'm feeling pretty calm now. But then I could feel myself moving into the feeling of compassion. And with this technique, you want to choose the second positive feeling that you're feeling. And so I'm feeling the feeling of compassion. And I'm sitting with that feeling for a moment and I'm like, okay, this is nice. Now, the thing with this technique is you want to go through it a couple of times. You want to associate that negative feeling that you were feeling at the very beginning, in my case, doubt. And as you move through these feelings, you're going to anchor it all the way to that positive feeling, that second positive feeling, in my case, of compassion. Now, I did this a couple of times. I'm moving through the frustration. I'm moving through the disgust and the frustration, and the sadness and the inferiority, and feeling the nothingness. And then eventually I make it back down to the compassion. I do this a couple of times. But then you have to shift your thought frame to, how does this compassion change each one of those feelings that you just moved through? And so you're watching yourself shift your mindset around how you're viewing that particular experience. And so as I'm feeling this feeling of inferiority and I'm noticing how this feeling of compassion is shifting that, I realize that this feeling that I'm having really isn't about me. It's just a feeling. And then I move into the sadness and I'm feeling the compassion and I'm like, I'm allowed to have this feeling, but it doesn't have to really be about me. It can just be there. And I do this for each of the feelings and I move back up. And then eventually, when I get to the space of doubt, I can tell that my doubt has shifted and I'm looking at it more through the lens of compassion. Now, this is not to say that I'm never going to have any doubt moving forward, but as I continue to do this exercise, as I continue to anchor in this doubt all the way down through compassion, that I'm not going to sit in doubt. That when I go into these spaces of doubt, it's automatically going to sink me into that feeling of compassion naturally. So I'm not staying stuck in that feeling. So even though I'm feeling that feeling and maybe I'll feel it for a few minutes, it's not going to run my day. And so this is a technique that you can use whenever you start feeling those stagnant emotions where you're like, oh, I can kind of tell I'm starting to identify with it. It's hard to pull yourself out sometimes. Like, these feelings literally pull you into trances. And so techniques like this drop through technique allows you to take yourself out of that trance so you can refocus your mind and then refocus your internal resources to be more productive towards your goals. Because if you're sitting in a feeling of doubt and you're trying to come up with a plan, then your plan is not really going to be very efficient. It's not going to be very effective because you're very limited on the amount of resources that you're willing to access, because you're like constantly doubting yourself in regards to the resources that you have available to you internally. But as you're accessing, compassion, for instance, and you're coming up with a plan, the feeling of compassion for me is a very open-minded experience. It's very expansive. It's experimental. It's I can mess up and know that it's not going to be held against me. It's that I can really allow myself to put myself out there and extend myself and know that this is just a place in my life right now versus the space of doubt that I was in. And so that's all that I have for this video. I know that it was very fast and very thorough. Well, I like to think that it was thorough, but I will be continuing to talk about more of these techniques. I just wanted to get this out here before I forgot about it because you need to start using it right fucking now. So I'll see you in the next one.